Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Sarah Schoch, and I'm a senior analyst at Aurora and your host of the Special Careers podcast episode called Berlin Graduate Analyst Program Explained. Today, we're sitting down with my guests and also current graduate analysts, Stephanie Valencia, Martin Vernon, and Isa Dijkstra, who will share their first-hand experience of working at Aurora on the graduate program in Berlin. Now, at Aurora, we offer our graduates an 18 to 21-month program during which they can take part in up to 3 placements in different teams within our business. At the end of the 3rd placement, they then move into a permanent position with one of our teams. And this is actually what I myself did. So I was a graduate analyst and then joined the research team on a permanent basis a year ago. And if you want to find more on the graduate program itself, then please go to auroraer.com/grads. All right, so I want to kick us off by getting to know you guys a little bit better and also getting to know a bit more about your backgrounds. Because I remember when I was a grad, I was always super impressed by how diverse our backgrounds were. And so it would be great if each of you could tell me a little bit more about what you did before you came to Aurora and also what led you to your career here. Maybe Isa, do you want to kick us off with this question?
Yeah, of course. So before Aurora, I studied geography for my undergrad, and then I did a master's in meteorology. And I think throughout those degrees, there was kind of like the red line of like being very interested in like climate change and sustainability. And I always thought the energy transition was a very important part of that. And then during my master's, I did my dissertation on how weather affects the electricity and energy production in India. And that kind of confirmed for me that I was really interested in the energy industry and really wanted to learn more about that. And that's how I ended up at Aurora.
Cool. Great. Thanks so much. That sounds super interesting. Also quite fascinating to hear actually that you did something that's not really, let's say, econ focused, because some people, they might think that you actually need an economics background in order to be able to work at Aurora. All right, Stephanie, what led you to Aurora? What did you do before you came here?
So just like Isa, I don't come from an energy background. So I did my bachelor's in maths and my master's in mathematical sciences. And the way that I found out about Aurora, it was through a friend and just sort of like looking for jobs. I became quite interested in the topic in itself. And at first, I was actually looking at more of like the modeling side of Aurora. But I am very glad that I ended up in more like the research and content side after that.
What thought process did you go through when you decided not to join the modeling team? Because then instead, you decided to join the graduate analyst program.
So having a math background, I first originally thought that the modeling part will be more for me. However, the more I looked into the topic, the more I became fascinated by it and ended up applying for this. Also, the fact that, so I come from England and moving to Berlin also was a very exciting prospect for me. So I decided to go for it. And as I said earlier, very glad that I did.
Martin, how about you? So what's your background and how did you end up at Aurora in the end?
Well, as you said earlier, Sarah, you don't need an econ background to be in this business. However, it certainly doesn't hurt. So I did my bachelor's in econ at Tilburg University in the Netherlands, and then did my master's at the Stockholm School of Economics. And then, on an exchange semester abroad, I by chance came upon a class taught by an excellent energy economist here in Berlin. I really, really like the topic. If you're an economist who is passionate for their profession, this is always a fun job to have. You get to think like an economist every day.
So Martin, what made you decide to apply for Aurora specifically in the end? And also, how did the whole application and interview process look like for you in the end?
Yeah, well, I mean, Aurora is one of the biggest players in the business, I'd say. It has a very storied reputation. It's quite well known across energy economic circles, both academic and commercial. This is a very well-reputed company. I was told about it. I came across a member of the research team at a job fair. And, we got on quite well. I really enjoyed hearing about the job. And so I decided to apply right away.
I was curious to hear how the interview process looked like.
Well, the interview process is a little long, but fairly understandable. When I went through it, there were 3 interviews with different members of the team. And then you end up in an interview with a fairly senior person in the team as your last interview. And at the end, you have a written assignment that you have to do, basically a summary of an article or something containing an energy topic. Now, it's not the way that this was described to me, both during the interview process and after the interview process, is that it doesn't matter so much that you get the answers right in the case studies, of which there will be 3, 1 in each interview. What matters more is that your reasoning is sound, that you're broadly knowledgeable about the topic, or that you can go through a problem logically, break it down into small steps, and explain it well to your interviewer. And then on the job, you will do the same thing every day with whoever is supervising the project you're working on.
Okay, great. So basically, you've already learned your first couple of skills by going through the interview process. At least it sounds like it.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, the interview process really reflects what the job looks like.
Now, I would be curious to hear how your first couple of weeks looked like. What was your onboarding like? What did you have to do? Isa, do you want to tell us a bit more about this?
I think what was really nice about the first few weeks is that the first 2 weeks were basically completely onboarding. We didn't really have to join a team yet. And it was just kind of, getting to know the company, going through a lot of training and getting to know people. I think a really nice thing about the grad program is that we all got assigned a buddy, which was someone who had either previously gone through the grad scheme or was kind of still in the grad scheme, but already a year in. So they were kind of the people we could, ask all the questions to that maybe you were afraid to ask the more senior people. So that was super nice. And I think the training was also really good because it was partially how to use all the software that Aurora uses. I think there's a lot of software that Aurora uses that I'd not used before. And Aurora has a lot of like company specific software where, a big part of the company is modeling. So we have a lot of our own models and learning how all of those models work, what kind of, the logic behind them is was super, super interesting. But then there's also more a part that's like generally how the energy industry works. And I think, like, as I said, and I think Stephanie also mentioned, like, a lot of us actually didn't really come from an energy background. And I think those training sessions were like super, super useful to actually, I didn't come here feeling like I had to know everything. It's like I came here and I actually got taught all, not everything about the energy industry, but I feel like you get taught all the things that you need to know. And then once you go into your work, you feel a lot more confident being like, okay, I feel like I actually understand the basics about energy rather than coming into your job feeling like you have to be an expert already. And I think that was really good. And then after the first 2 weeks, we kind of started to move into our first rotation into the teams. And then sort of in the beginning, it was more sort of like you'd do a few things and still be mainly in training. And then after the first month, we would kind of like full time join the teams that we were in for our first rotation. And I think that was a very good sort of gradually easing in to the work that we were going to be doing sort of after the first month of onboarding.
Yeah, and just to jump in there with what Isa said, I think for me it was super helpful to have that 2 weeks to sort of get on and learn a lot. I feel like I'm still learning every day on the job. There is always something new. However, the fact that we had those 2 weeks to fully, dive into energy markets for me particularly was very, very helpful because I've never touched the topic before.
Yeah, exactly. And even trainings about like how certain energy technologies work. Like I'd never really thought about like, the technology behind the solar panel. And now I'm still, not an expert, but I feel like I can explain the basics. And that's really nice that you feel like you kind of have a basic understanding of a lot of the topics that you touch.
Thanks, guys. Well, that sounds like you're still in the learning process, and I myself definitely am. And I think that's something that's so cool about Aurora, because every day, basically, you're learning something new, whether that be about a certain model or a technology or a market. I think that's what really makes this work so fascinating, because it's such a broad topic. There's always something new to learn about it. Okay, so I think you already touched upon this, Isa, when you were talking about your current work. So basically, after 2 weeks, up to a month, you went into the rotations. And maybe to reiterate here for our listeners, in the Berlin office, at least at the moment, we have 3 rotations. And there might be actually an additional rotation coming up in the next cohort. But so currently, our graduates, they can move into a research team, our advisory team, but also our commercial team. And it would be great to hear from you 3 in which rotation you're currently in, and also what kind of work you do within this rotation. Stephanie, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you currently do in your day-to-day work? Because I heard you're working on a very exciting topic at the moment.
Yes, of course, Sarah. So my first rotation in the graduate program is research. So I'm currently working in a product development. So just for a bit of context, we currently model a few countries. And by that, I mean, we produced reports in a quarterly basis. So for example, in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium. But we also have new markets that are coming up. And this is what I'm currently working on at the moment. And I'm working currently on developing the Czech and Slovakian market. So just yesterday, actually, we had our first interaction with client on the MCS. So that's a multi-client study in which we showed our first findings to different clients and developers and all sorts of people from in the industry, and it has been super insightful to learn about these markets, and just how it's very exciting to see how it would develop.
Isa, maybe do you want to add something on this? Because I know that you're also working in the research team, but I think you're working on a bit of a different topic at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm currently working in the Dutch team because I'm also from the Netherlands. So that's very nice to kind of look into a bit more on that. And because the Dutch team also does Belgium, and the Netherlands and Belgium are both a bit more established markets. So that means that Aurora basically publishes quarterly reports on what's happening in the markets, kind of with updated assumptions, and then what those sort of assumptions mean for the forecasts of prices. So I'm currently working on the April report, which is kind of the big report when a lot of the assumptions are sort of looked into, and you get to sort of look at the assumptions, see whether they still hold, what kind of changed over the last year. And I think that's really interesting because you really get to look into a specific market in detail and figure out if everything we currently have in the model is still up to date. But then I also worked on a group meeting, which is kind of when Aurora sort of picks a topic that's relevant to the energy industry and then does a lot of analysis on it, which then turns into a presentation for clients. So in November, I actually got to go to Amsterdam with the Dutch team to present our analysis on a topic to a lot of the clients that Aurora has in the Netherlands. And I think that was also really nice to kind of have the balance of working on sort of the model updates, but then also sometimes being able to dive into a really specific topic and do really deep analysis on a certain topic that might not be covered so much in the reports that the research team generally works on.
Do you maybe want to share what kind of topic you're working on, just so that our listeners, they also get an idea of the topics that keep us busy within the research team?
Yeah, of course. So for the last GM, we worked on power purchase agreements, which before the GM, I'd never actually heard about. So, the first 2 days, we're just doing a lot of reading about what it actually is. But they're basically large scale power contracts where, say, two parties in the energy industry kind of agree, okay, you're going to buy this much energy from me for a certain price. So it's almost like, an energy contract that maybe you have with your energy provider, except it's about like a lot more energy. And currently I'm doing a bit of help on another group meeting, but this one is about the grid and kind of about like around grid fees and like grid connections, grid congestion. So kind of all kinds of topics around that. So they're very varied topics and kind of about what's currently relevant in the energy industry.
Okay, so we talked a bit about the research team, but Martin, do you want to tell us what you guys do in the advisory team at the moment and how your work looks like there?
Yeah, of course. Well, the advisory team works quite a bit differently to research in that we work quite closely with clients, right? So typically a client comes to the advisory team when they have a more sort of topic that isn't covered by our standard reports. So say the client wants to see what happens when some of our assumptions are not fulfilled, or if, I don't know, there's more build out of solar than even our wildest predictions would expect. Or most of the time what happens is a client wants to value their asset, wants to know how much money they can make with their battery, their power plant, their solar farm, etc. And we work on telling them how much it's worth or help them get a loan with the bank or that sort of thing. So we do a lot of very different things in the advisory team. It's really exciting because really no 2 days are the same. You will be working on all sorts of different projects. Some can be quite short, others can be rather long. But I'll tell you what, you'll never get tired of one thing too quickly.
Yeah, I remember. It's a very fast-paced environment within the advisory team and definitely always stays interesting. So we've heard a bit what work looks like in our research and advisory team, but just to reiterate for our listeners, we also have a rotation within the commercial team. So that's more the sales side of our business, where we mainly work on business development as well as account management of our existing clients. So basically, you're working together with our subscribers that subscribe to our research products, as we've already heard from Isa and Stephanie. And we have quite established products there, but also we're currently working on expanding to new markets. So this is where you will interact with clients to figure out their needs and also their use cases and convince them of the high quality of our products. So I think it's been great to hear what you guys do within the different teams, but what does a typical day look like for you? So what do you actually do when you're talking about developing a new model, developing a new market? What does it actually mean? Martin, you said you're working on an asset valuation. So what does a typical day look like for you in order to get that valuation done?
As I said earlier, in the advisory team, no 2 days look the same. However, sometimes they rhyme. So most of the times what happens is you meet up in the morning with your project leader, be that the associate or senior associate or project leader that's leading the team. You decide on the things to do for the day, and that will usually be one of three things. You will either be doing some reading, looking into stuff that the client sent you, policy updates, talking to the research team to understand the topic that they've already read a lot about. We could either do that, or we can model. Usually, we put in the client's information onto our software, run the models, look at the results, see that they're not too crazy, and then apply those down. And then the third thing that we do is write those things down. So we create a very nice report for the client. We put in some data and then send them out to them. Or to whoever they want us to send it to.
Stephanie, does a typical day at Aurora look similar for you, or is it quite different in the research team?
I think it's different in many ways. So perhaps it's different, but in a more long-term basis. And by that, what I mean is that we have, so projects tend to be a lot longer in research. So for example, a day for me when I come in the morning usually starts with a check-in with a project lead and other people that you're working with in the project. In this case, for me, Czech and Slovakian market. And then we go into kind of researching what we have to do that for that day. But also we have meetings with a modeler. So far, as I mentioned earlier, we've kind of been trying to set up the model to see what it would look like in the past. And then what this involves is, what we would look at what it would look like in the future. But before that, we have to put all of these inputs into a model, all of these assumptions, and this is kind of what we have to research. And this is what I do. I do a lot of research on, what does the energy mix look like in Slovakia and Czechia. And so put it in the model. Then we also have a lot of meetings, as I said, with our modelers to kind of align on this and make the model work itself. And then when we get more to the end of the project, we have to produce our deliverables. So usually that comes in the form of PowerPoints and Excels, and we've produced very pretty slides. So that's what we do.
Yeah, that's for sure. Aurora is very well known for producing very fancy and very understandable slides. So this is definitely a skill that you will be learning if you decide to join Aurora. So we've talked a lot about the work that you do, but now I want to know what makes you enjoy the work that you do. What's your favorite thing that you've worked on so far? Isa, do you have like a favorite project that you've worked on?
Yeah, I do. I think my favorite project so far has been working on the January report, which is one of like the quarterly report updates that we've sort of mentioned before. So I worked on the Belgian market for that. And January is kind of one of our sort of smaller update where we don't actually change that much in the assumptions. And because it was a smaller update, I actually got a lot of sort of responsibility and ownership over that project. So I was sort of together with, my project manager, the only person working on that report, which meant that I got to do all the modeling. So you get to like change all the inputs. And you also look at the policy update. So you sort of make sure you keep up to date with the policy that's happening. And then you try to create, or update slides that we have about those policies. So for example, for Belgium, I looked a lot into nuclear power into Belgium because there's a big debate about how long certain nuclear reactors are going to stay open. And I think it was really nice to sort of also, use that knowledge and in the model to like run a few tests. And I think in general, just having a model that feels like mine and that I'm worked on a lot, I think is really nice because you can really, see your output going directly to the clients. And I think that, makes you also feel very valued in your work, that, the work that you're producing is actually being published. And I think that was, a big highlight of my time in the research rotation.
So I think for me, what makes Aurora very, very special is the fact that it's such an international company. So I think perhaps that there are two things here. So first, that it's very international, but also the people that work here would make it much, much better. So I've had the chance to work with the Spanish team as well. For a bit of context, within Europe, we have quite a few offices. So we have one office in Paris, one office in Madrid, Stockholm, and there are a few more. But I worked with the Spanish team, and this collaboration with other offices is fantastic. You get to see things from a different perspective. You get to explore all the markets as well, and I think it's great. But also the fact that people are just generally very nice. Everyone is very approachable, and particularly for you as a new as a new joiner, it's very important to have supportive people next to you, where you're not afraid of ask a question, even though you might think it's a bit of a silly question. And they really make you feel like there is no such thing as a stupid question. So I think for me, this is what makes me want to come to work every day, and I'm very excited about it.
And I think actually you also told me you also really enjoy kind of say the events that we create at Aurora. Do you maybe want to elaborate a little bit more on that as well?
Yeah, so it's very much encouraged to actually meet other people from other offices. For example, if on last July we had our offsite, which basically it was a big event in which every European office went to Oxford, which is where Aurora started, and we have this big event. It was kind of like a team building event, and even though you don't work with these people every day, you have a chance to meet them, talk about things that you've worked in, but also if you have had the chance to work with them, it has been virtually. Just like in my case, I worked with a Spanish team, and it was all virtually. So it was super nice to get to see them in person. We also have other events that we travel to. I've also worked in the Berlin Summit, and this was more Berlin based, but as well, I also got to know other people from other offices.
Martin, I know you have a very nice anecdote that maybe also kind of will speak to our listeners and give them a better idea of the kind of people that work at Aurora. So I found it quite funny when you told me about this story. So maybe do you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I had just gotten the job, right? And as a good boy, I put on a suit for all of my interviews, presented myself all nice. And then, but the issue is I only had one, and it was a dour black suit. And so I was calling my mother before my first day, kind of panicking about like, oh my God, what's this going to be like? And she says, Martin, these people are consultants. They're fancy. You got to wear a suit. You got to be all, look all smart. Now, luckily, a couple days later, I got an email saying that the onboarding would be business casual dress code. So very happily, I did not buy a new suit. I came into the office, and the first person I saw was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. And so I knew, oh my God, this is amazing. This is a very chill work environment. It's a very fun company. And I think, our coworkers are really quite young on average. So you will feel more often like you're among peers than, in a more hierarchical sort of a setting. Yeah, most of your coworkers just feel like they could just be, people naturally from outside.
So do any of you guys have any advice for the application process to the graduate program? Isa, do you want to go first, maybe?
I think just apply. Like, I think obviously there's a lot of preparation you can do, but in the end, I think for me, the main thing in applying for things was that I'd just be nervous and I'd be overthinking it. And I think just, get your application out and just don't think that you're not the kind of person they're looking for. And I think also something that was kind of useful for me was actually asking some help from like my uni career server. So I had them look over my cover letter. So I had a little bit more confidence in that. So I think just, go for it. And if you're interested in what the graduate program is about, you might as well try and apply and see where it goes.
If I may, actually, I have one piece of advice specifically about the interview. So you got to remember that what we're looking for in an applicant isn't so much someone who can get the right results on the first try. Don't stress about that too much. What matters is your thinking. Don't hesitate to take a moment to think about things, to organize your notes, to any of that kind of thing. Overthinking won't help you. You need to think things through clearly, explain your reasoning step by step. And if you can do that, we will most likely be happy with you.
To add one last thing would be to just apply, even if you feel like you don't fill every single criteria on the job description, just apply, because that was the case for me. So I didn't come from an energy background, as I already mentioned several times, but I just gave it a go, and I am here. So I think just go for it if you really want to, and if you're really interested, then it will work out.
Okay, so does any of you have some advice that you would give your younger self now in hindsight? Where you would be like, I wish I would have done that differently back then.
I just say, don't stress too much. Uh, you're gonna turn out fine, and I feel like if you've been working hard on school, if you've been working hard on all these kinds of things, you're probably gonna find something that suits you. It may be Aurora, hopefully it is. But if not, don't stress about it. You know, it's important to take things relaxed when you're doing interviews, when you're looking for jobs, when you're, any of these kinds of things. You don't need to get ahead of yourself or think 3 steps forward, like, oh, what if I don't get it? What if I don't? Blah blah blah. It's okay. You'll find something eventually. Hopefully, it's here. If not, don't stress. Everything's going to be fine. Stressing will probably not make things better. So, best to just chill out.
Isa, any advice you would have given yourself 5 years ago?
I think probably along the same lines of Martin, also just follow your interest, like don't stress too much. When you're just starting uni, just thinking about careers, that you need to know what you want to do and need to start working on it. I think by just, following the things that you're interested in, I first was interested in sustainability, then I went into climate change, then through sort of doing more climate research, I figured out I liked energy. I think you don't have to decide what you want to do very early on, and just being able to explore different options is actually very useful. And I think, Sarah, as you also mentioned, like the energy industry can be quite, or used to be maybe quite hierarchical. And I think in that sense also, make sure you apply to companies where you really like the culture of. And I think, maybe that's advice that I already followed, because I ended up at Aurora. And I think where, even though obviously you have like, your project manager and your, other managers, it feels very non-hierarchical, and like you can always, give advice to anyone. So I think that's also like, make sure you find a company that you like the culture of, because in the end, that's where you're going to be working every day.
Now, we're almost at the end of our episode, but to wrap it up, I would just like to hear from each of you in 3 short, brief words how you would describe the office culture at Aurora. Stephanie, do you want to go first?
So I would like to answer this question with more than 3 words, because yesterday on preparation for the podcast, I was asking my colleagues about what 3 words they would describe Aurora with, and it was very interesting to hear from different people. One of the words that kept coming up were ambitious, curious, and empowering. So maybe those are the 3 that I like the most. But also there was one colleague who said good vibes only. And I really like that story, and I wanted to share it with you.
And Martin?
Friendly, challenging, and exciting would be the 3 that I'd use. In advisory, you're very fast paced, going from place to place, looking at thing to thing. And so, yeah, you'll find things that are very hard. You'll find things that are not so hard. But it'll always be quite exciting. You'll get to learn about all sorts of cool stuff.
And last but not least, Isa, what would your 3 words be?
I think probably very similar to the others, but I'd say informal, ambitious, and social.
Okay, well, thanks so much to the 3 of you for sharing your insights and also your experience that you've had throughout the graduate program so far. And I'm sure you've really excited our listeners about the program. And hopefully we'll see many of you applying for the graduates program in Berlin over the coming months. So if you want to do so, or if you just want to get more information about Aurora's graduate program in general, we're not just having them in Berlin, but also in other offices, then please go to our website. As I've mentioned before, it's called auroraer.com/grads. And there you will find all the information that you need on the program. You can apply there and sign up for our mailing list to always be up to date with the latest news. So thanks everybody for listening, and goodbye.